G'day folks, in this week's episode of Art Studio Chat, I want to talk to you about a concept of how to understand light moving through a landscape, and this will definitely help you to make your landscapes look more realistic. G'day folks, Rod here from the Learn to Paint Academy. Welcome to this week's Art Studio Chat. Today I'm in the office rather than the art studio, because I wanted to just demonstrate to you a pretty simple principle, but it's one that will definitely help you improve your landscape painting. Now, it's to do with values, and we've talked a lot about values at the Learn to Paint Academy. It's something I always stress in the Learn to Paint TV episodes and through all of our courses, because if you want to paint realistic looking landscapes and seascapes, then values is one of the most important things to think about. So what I want to just expand on the concept of values is the idea of how light moves through a landscape. Okay, and we'll do this over a few different videos, and I'm going to cover this in a lot more depth in our soon to be released definitive guide to landscape painting. But I thought I'd just share this principle with you today. And the principle is all about understanding where the source of light is in a landscape and the different planes that you'll find, and I'll explain this. I'm not talking about aeroplanes, right? Different planes that you'll find in the landscape and how light relates to those planes. So I've drawn a little diagram here using the computer. Okay, so as you can see, I've drawn up a simple little landscape and I've set up a values pattern, because this is, generally speaking, how values will be represented in a landscape painting, right? So at the top there, number one, we've got our sky, obviously. Number two is our field, right? The flat plane. Number three is the mountains, right? And number four is our vertical, which is our tree there, obviously. So when you look at a landscape and you're going to do a landscape painting, you need to think about the different planes that exist within a landscape and how the light is going to affect those planes. And this is not something we talked about a lot so far in Learn to Paint Academy, but I will be introducing it more and more. So here's the thing you need to understand. Number one, the sky. The sky is the source of all light in a landscape, right? Unless you're doing a nocturnal where you've got, street lamp or something. If it's not that, then the sky is the source, right? The sun. It exists in the sky and it moves through the sky. And we'll talk about some of the more complex ideas of the light source in other videos to come. But for now, I want you to understand this simple concept, right? The sky is the source of all the light in a landscape. So therefore, well, I shouldn't say all, because you do get reflected light and things like that, but that's really not the source. So yeah, it is true. The sky is the source of all light, right? So number one there, you can see, is the lightest value of the four different values I've got represented on this little sketch. So when you're doing a landscape or a seascape painting, the sky always has to be the lightest mass, right? So I'm talking about big shapes here and clumping together big shapes and then understanding how they relate to each other in terms of values, right? Values, darkness to lightness. So it's about clumping things together into a mass or a big shape and then looking at the relationship values-wise between those big shapes. Okay, so you can see here I've done a very basic drawing and I've got four big shapes: sky, field, mountain and tree, right? Four big shapes. So how do they relate to each other in terms of values? So the sky is always going to be the lightest value. Okay, now within the sky there will be some dark patches and light patches and so on, but as a general big shape and a general mass, it's going to be lighter than the tree, for example, right? By quite a bit of contrast there. Now, the reason why it's the lightest value is because it is the source of all light, okay, the sun. And what I've seen from lots and lots of beginners is they paint their sky too dark. Now, you have to understand that the sky is an arc, okay? So when we're looking across a landscape like what we're doing here, the sky, where it meets the mountain there, is the lowest part of the sky. Okay, we're not looking at the part of the sky that's directly overhead, which would be darker. So we're looking at the lowest part of the sky, and it is going to be the lightest mass in your painting, okay? So you should always make sure your sky is lighter than the next lightest thing. The next lightest large shape is going to be all of your horizontal planes. So in this case, I've represented the horizontal plane just with the field, okay? There could be other horizontal planes though. There could be, if you've got a cow standing in a field, then across its back, that would be a horizontal plane as well, okay? So therefore it would have a similar value to the field color or the field value. So the field, the reason when it lays horizontal, light is impacting on it directly, okay? It doesn't matter where the sun is in the sky, it is going to be bouncing off the field directly or any horizontal plane, okay? Now, of course, within that horizontal plane, there's going to be some undulations, there's going to be some bits that aren't as flat as other bits, of course, so we're generalizing and we're chunking up into large shapes here. So as a general rule, the horizontal planes are going to be the second value in a landscape painting. Then the third value is going to be any planes that are on a slant or an angle. Okay, so a mountain is on an angle, it's slanted. Okay, so therefore it's not getting as much direct light as a horizontal plane, but it's still getting a reasonable amount of light. So it's going to be darker in value than the horizontal plane, but it's still not going to be our darkest element of a painting, right? So then, therefore, our darkest element, the fourth value in this little sketch, is any any vertical planes. So the tree stands upright, and there's going to be a dark side of that tree, right? There's going to be a side of that tree that's just not getting impacted by the light, whereas the field around it will be because it's horizontal, okay? So all of your vertical planes are going to be your darker values in a painting. So the side of a cow would be the vertical part, or the vertical plane is going to be a lot darker in value than the back of the cow, the horizontal plane, okay? Now I'm generalizing, of course, because the cow could be laying down or whatever, right? But you know what I'm talking about. A cow standing in a field, on its side, it's going to be a darker value than the back of it because it's a horizontal plane. So your tree there, as you can see, I've drawn that in as quite a darker value by comparison to everything else. So if you keep this in mind when you're doing your paintings and you generalize about the big shapes, then you are going to be a lot closer to success than a lot of people get with their landscape painting, right? And this is something I've had to learn myself. So now, obviously within each of these four bands, there's going to be gradients of value, right? So if you look at number 4, the big tree, that could be our darkest dark in the painting. Imagine if I then had a second and third tree that were further away, then the value is going to shift. It's going to get lighter as it moves towards the hill, right? But it's still going to be darker than the hill. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see it, right? So it'll have no depth in the painting. So it's going to be somewhere between a 3 and a 4 as the object moves further away from our viewing point, okay? Same thing with the field. Number 2 there. Number 2 is going to have a gradient in it as well. The part of the field that's closest to the viewer is going to be a slightly darker version of that value than when it moves off into the distance. Things get lighter as they move into the distance. So each of these are going to have a gradient of the value within their range. Okay, this is the important thing. Make sure you keep your values within the range of where they fit within the different planes in a landscape. So just to recap, we have number 1 is the sky, source of all light. It's going to be our lightest value, generally speaking. Number 2 is our horizontal planes, and in this case, I've represented that with a field. That is going to be our second lightest value. Okay. Number 3 is going to be anything on a slight, an angle, like a mountain or a hillside. Anything angled is going to get less light, but is still going to be lighter than a vertical plane. And then number 4 is all of our vertical planes, like the side of a tree, side of a cow, side of a building in shadow, is going to be our darkest value. Okay. Now this is, again, I just want to stress, because I don't want to get comments from people saying, oh yeah, but, right? So I'm generalizing, I'm chunking up to a high level where we're grouping everything within a mass together. Now within that tree, I know there's going to be lights, and that light might be lighter than the field color. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. So we're talking about a general concept and principle, And if you follow that when you're setting up your landscape painting, then I guarantee you that you're going to have more success with your painting than without giving this sort of thought to how the light is going to move through your landscape. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. As I said, this is just one of the topics that we're going to be covering in the definitive guide to landscape painting, which we'll be working on in the next month or two, and I'll keep you posted as to when that comes out. The idea behind the definitive guide to landscape painting is to really put together a comprehensive body of knowledge on how to effectively paint quality landscape paintings, and I'll be putting everything I've learned over the last pretty much decade into that course. So look out for that. Hope you found this episode of Art Studio Chat helpful. Please leave a comment and like the video and share it if you've found it of help. And I'll see you next time in Art Studio Chat. Cheers for now.